Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's weekly walk. My name is Ian. I'll be your presenter today on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. I see we have guests from all over the world. We really appreciate your messages. It's so cool to see the kind of reach that we have and the kind of virtual community we're building on this platform. It's so great to see you all again for another walk through my favorite place in New York, Central Park. And today we will be exploring the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, which is the smallest of the 3 woodlands found in the park. We'll be walking together for about 15 minutes. And all of the photos you'll see were taken by myself yesterday. So we're practically getting a live look at the park. We'll have to put on our imagination caps and imagine we're walking through the park. And we here at the Conservancy love doing this program every week because no matter where you are in the world, you can see Central Park and imagine that you're walking through it. And it's so great to be able to do that through technology with all of you here today. So our mission at the Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. So I hope that by joining us today, no matter where you are, there are surely pace and fast paces and pressures, I'm sure. So my intention is that this program is a nice break in your day and hopefully makes you appreciate Central Park or parks or nature in general just a little bit more. So some housekeeping very quickly. If you haven't joined us before on Zoom, there are a few ways that you can interact with us and others. You can use the chat feature, as many of you are doing now. You can say hello, add comments, and share where you're tuning in from. There's also a Q&A feature. Ryan's on the back end today, so he'll be answering questions for you all. And then lastly, there's a poll feature as well. So you'll see a poll pop up momentarily. There's also, as you can probably tell, live transcript option. So if you'd like to use closed captioning, you can do so by selecting that on the Zoom control bar. And while we're here, I also want to plug a few things. Just 2 things today, actually. If you are in New York, we have in-person tours. So please come if you'd like to. You can take a tour through the park with Ryan, myself, Juan, or Jose, and see the park in person. So Ryan will share that link now. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that the last iteration of the Harlem Mirror Performance Festival is taking place this Sunday. So if you're in the area and you like gospel music, come by this Sunday, August 8th, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. to see Nikki Holloway and the New Generation Gospel Ensemble. It's a great concert that takes place at the Harlem Mirror in the north of the park. All right, I think that's everything. Let's jump into the park. So the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, like I mentioned, is the smallest of the park's 3 woodlands. The North Woods in the north of the park comes in at 40 acres. The Ramble in about the middle of the park is 36 acres, and the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, which we can see here at the very bottom of the park, is just 4 acres. So it's a small space, but to me, it feels much larger the way it's designed because, it feels like you're hiking through a pretty dense woodland. So we'll see that today. And when I outline the map here on the bottom, this blue box shows you that we're really at the southernmost section of the park. So if you are visiting New York, I think it's a great place to come. Maybe you're staying in Midtown Manhattan. I feel like that's a place where a lot of tourists are staying. So this is a place that's really easy to access for anyone. And you can see on our route today, we're going to start on 59th Street, Central Park South, and very quickly we'll be able to get into this woodland landscape. And I did my best to create an accurate map, but I have to admit it's difficult because the paths wander around quite a bit. So you're just going to have to understand that if you come visit, this might not be exact. And while we're on this screen, before we jumped in the park, I want to launch a poll and just ask if you have visited a woodland in a city. I ask because I think it's a pretty special experience, especially in a city as dense and crowded as New York. It's so different than a typical urban environment. It also got me interested in hearing how relationships between nature and the urban exist in other parts of the world. So I'd be curious to hear if maybe where you're from or a place you've visited, if you have one that sticks out in your mind. I'd love to hear it if you can share in the chat. I will share the results of that poll in a bit, but for now, I've done enough talking and housekeeping. We need to get into the park. All right. And here we are. This is not the park. This is New York City. This is Manhattan. This is 6th Avenue, also known as Avenue of the Americas. It's flanked by tall concrete, glass, brick, whatever buildings for miles. It's like a little canyon here filled with automobiles. And so you have to imagine the park in this context. You're walking up this street. In the summer, it's pretty hot. And it seems like this is all there is for miles until you see this wall of trees. So it's really a breathtaking sight when you get to the end of this. It really commands your attention because it's a stark break in your environment. And we're greeted here by a statue of the Cuban revolutionary Jose Marti, who fought against the Spanish Empire and was killed in battle in the 1890s. He's at the very top of the Avenue of the Americas, and just to the left, you'll see a group of people about to walk downstairs. Those are the stairs that we're walking down together now. And I'll add that it's a muggy day in New York, but it actually has been a lot cooler. So it's really beautiful weather for our walk today. And just down these stairs here, we will be transported into the park. Remember how noisy and crowded our environment was just a moment ago when we were surrounded by cars and tall buildings? Well, look where we are now. Just a minute away, we find ourselves in a bucolic landscape. In this case, we're looking at the pond and some shoreline plantings here. The one that stands out to me is the oak leaf hydrangea on the right side of your screen. Really beautiful shrub and a great selection of trees around the landscape as well. The trees on the left side of the screen are in the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, so we will be there momentarily. I should do my job and share the poll here. Let's see. Okay, it seems like most people have been to a woodland in an urban area. It's a pretty broad question, but I really just wanted to spur some conversation about maybe a cool place that you've been, because it would be nice to get a tip. I always like to see how different cities approach creating respite in their own places. So would love to hear about that. And as we continue along the pond, you'll see that we're just going up this path here, and we'll get to the entrance of the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. So it really exists in relation to the pond. As you can see, it sticks out. It was actually originally known as the promontory. It's basically a big hill, and it overlooks the pond. So the promontory was an appropriate name, and it was only until in 1986 that it was renamed for, I forget the gentleman's name. I have it written down somewhere. I must have misplaced my notes. Oh, here we go. George Hervey Hallett Jr. I didn't know much about him, but he was an activist and a naturalist. And it was renamed for him in the 1980s. And so as we go up this path here, if you come into the park, it's just a short walk. Although in the summer, it's mostly green, right? So there's not as many colors standing out as the spring or the fall. However, when you look closely, you can find beautiful colors in any season. In this case, there are a lot of great summer flowers like this sweet pepper bush, this pink and white flower that attracts hummingbirds and insects, including bees. You know, it's great for pollinators. So if you have the time, take a moment, look at the details of the park. That's what I really hope to bring out in these walks, because it is the small details. It's a million small details that make Central Park such a wonderful place. And when you get to the end of that path, you'll see a big tree here. That's when you'll know you'll take a right and you will get to the entrance. So right where this where this figure is the entrance to the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. There's only one entrance to the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, and it looks like this. It's a rustic wooden gate, which was added in 2016. That's when the latest restoration of the Hallett Nature Sanctuary was completed. Before that, you could not come into the Hallett Nature Sanctuary except for an occasional guided tour, and even those only began in 2013. So this is a very new landscape. I suspect that many people familiar with Central Park have not been to this landscape, and it's worth coming because it's a really wonderful example of how a natural landscape can be restored to become a beautiful place to visit for people, and also an important landscape for wildlife and plants as well. So you can come through this gate and you'll see some information about the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, namely when you can visit. So a lot of people always ask when it's open. It opens at 10 a.m. daily, and the closing time changes seasonally. It's always going to be 30 minutes prior to sunset, just so you know. It's got this nice bonded wood chip path you probably have seen when we've visited this landscape on previous weekly walks. It makes it more accessible. If you use a wheelchair, you can come up on this path, and if you walk, it's also pretty comfortable. I find it does feel like you're hiking, but it's kind of it's a very pleasant hike because the path is so well maintained. And when you first get into the Hallett Nature Sanctuary, you have the option to stop and sit on this nice rustic bench. I think this is cool because you really only have to walk in a couple feet, and you can enjoy a serene, quiet, peaceful woodland experience. I've used this before on my lunch break. I just wanted to get out of the city briefly. So you can walk in right away and you can sit down here and read a book or just take in nature. And to me, that makes this space really well designed. It's very intentional. I think that you have this space to sit just inside. Maybe you don't have time to do a whole hike, but that's what we're going to do today. So you can walk a little bit further and wind up the path here, and you'll see that it does really feel like a hike. I said this is by far the smallest woodland, but it's designed to me to be an experience that you can spend maybe even 30 minutes or more in. You can go up this hill here and you'll see that it's really dense in the summer. What's amazing is that 59th Street and Midtown are just a few hundred feet away. Sorry, I misspoke there. All the buildings on 59th Street are just a few hundred feet or a few hundred meters away. But you never know it in certain parts of the Hallett because of how dense the canopy is. It not only blocks out the sights, it does a pretty good job about knocking out or blocking out most of the noises as well. So besides the occasional siren, it's mostly birds chirping and squirrels scampering across the woodland floor that you're hearing. You'll see some awesome trees in this landscape as well, such as this ash tree. It's one of my favorite trees because my old apartment building had a great ash tree that sat right outside my bedroom window. So I love that tree. And it's a great tree that we have in the park as well. It's got this beautiful furrowed bark, which is another detail you can take a close look at when you come and visit the park. And it's got leaves on it. Actually, I've outlined with this red box just one leaf. This looks like many leaves, right? But the ash tree has compound leaves, or a leaf with many leaflets. In this case, it has 7 leaflets or lobes of the leaf. You can learn more about trees on some of our tree tours that we do as well. And I love the way that the woodland floor has been so well taken care of and restored. You can see here just how beautiful the floor of the woodland is. There are still some invasive plants, is my understanding, but the Hallett has really been planted with the desire to encourage the growth of natural or of plants native to the New York area. And as a result, it feels like a really thriving space. And of course, you get this immersive experience, but you need to stay on the path as to not trample these smaller plants that are easier to miss. And you can see that those instructions provided by these signs that are all over the place. And they say native plantings in progress. It looks really good already, but remember I said it only opened 5 years ago. So I imagine in 10 or 20 years, this space will be even more impressive with the amount of native growth that it has. And you'll see they're not only plants scampering around the grounds, there are also a ton of squirrels. So as we're walking through here, it's almost hard to avoid the squirrels because of how active this natural space is. And here we are. Once again, I think I did a mediocre job at actually laying out the paths on our little map here. It's not confusing when you're in there, but it winds around a lot, so it was difficult to draw. But if you do come visit, don't worry. There's really only one way that you can go in and out of the Hallett, so no promises, but I doubt you'll get lost in this just 4-acre woodland space. But there are some really cool sights to see, so it's worth walking through the whole path. You can even see a waterfall here that goes over this big hunk of bedrock that's sticking out of the ground. It's got these glacial striations in it, these grooves in the rock that carry water down into the ponds. And then you also get some great views of where we entered the park. Once again, the dense woodland does such a good job blocking out the city. I think this image is a great example of how intentional design can achieve some pretty remarkable effects. In this case, the quiet piece I keep mentioning that's away from the city. But if you look closely in the background, there are buildings. There are really tall buildings, some of the tallest buildings in the Western Hemisphere. And outlined by this red box, you can see Jose Marti, who we saw in the beginning. But you can, viewing the statue from this vantage point is an entirely different experience from viewing it on 59th Street. And of course, this took a ton of work. And I just am always impressed by the understanding that people came together to create these experiences. They didn't just fall from the sky. These are landscapes that were designed and created by people and planted and dug and built by people. And you can also see the stairs that we walked down before. Pretty incredible, I think. There are some other great native plants here, such as this sumac. This is smooth sumac. You can see it's got this distinct, dense cluster of berries here. It's really popular with birds. And as we get towards the end of our walk here, you sort of wind uphill. We've meandered around quite a bit, but there is definitely a logical endpoint in the Hallett, which is its peak or its promontory, if you will. You can see here, it's toward the eastern end of the Hallett. The views you'll get are south facing and east facing. And you'll see that evidently there was a lot of damage from recent storms. There were quite a few big storms in the month of July in New York, and it seems like a lot of the trees have been knocked down, unfortunately. And when I was in there, as we're walking around, we'll see that there are a lot of Conservancy staff and volunteers fast at work trying to clean up the landscape and assess the damage. And I'll go back for a second. If you're curious where these things go, as long as they're healthy plants and healthy wood, most likely these will end up in the mount, which is in the northern section of Central Park, to be either cut down to wood chips that will then be reused in the park, or potentially other organic materials will be composted and eventually used to enrich the soil of the park. So at the very least, these natural materials will not be wasted. And from this vantage point, we can see some buildings in Midtown. But once again, in the summer, they're hidden quite well, which I really like. I mean, I do like this view though, because it does remind us that New York City is so close to us, which makes this experience even more impressive. I didn't really include it because I'm not really a huge fan of it, frankly, personally. But there's a really tall skyscraper in the back, which I believe it's either this one or the other new one that's going up is, I think, the tallest residential building in the Western Hemisphere. That could be incorrect. I did not fact check that before sharing that information. That's something I had heard someone else say. But even if that's not entirely true, it is a gigantic building. It dwarfs the other skyscrapers around it. Which is another reason why I appreciate this landscape, because you can really block out all those tall buildings and forget you're in the city for a few minutes. You can also go down this path over here and get a better view of the pond, although right now there's caution tape signifying that we should not go there. I didn't actually ask a gardener or someone from the natural areas team what happened here, but please, when you visit the park, use your common sense and figure there's probably a good reason why this is blocked off, and let's not take our chances. Maybe there's a tree or something that was dislodged from the storm. We can still go up to the top of the Hallett, where we're going to finish our walk and get some amazing views. There's this beautiful piece of rustic architecture that the Conservancy created in its latest restoration that, to me, is a unique space in the park. It's such a nice place to come sit. And it's great that at the end of your hike, at the very top of your little hike here, you get a nice place to sit down and enjoy a 360-degree immersive nature experience. And you'll see on the right, there's this little balcony over here. That's where we'll end our tour. You can see that you can step out on these wooden planks here and get a really wonderful view of the Upper East Side. Those buildings over there are on 5th Avenue. So you can see the city, is part of the experience of being in Central Park. I think the architecture that you can see from the park is part of the experience, but I am so impressed by the areas that allow you to escape the city as well, because I think that's one of the important functions that Central Park serves. I hope you enjoyed this peaceful excursion through the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. It was really fun. It's definitely one of my favorite places in the park because of how accessible it is from 59th Street. It's really easy to pop in here. So whether you live in the city or you're visiting, I would definitely recommend coming in here. You could spend 15 minutes, but have a really memorable experience here because of all the beautiful nature you get to see, and just the really impactful experience of being in a really crowded, noisy place and then suddenly being in a quiet, peaceful place. I don't know, I have a really special experience every time I do that. So I hope that this conveyed that. I hope you enjoyed this walk. Of course, we'll be back next week, so I hope that you'll be joining us. But I have to say thank you for joining us today. I'd like to share that the park needs us and we need the park. What is it about Central Park that you need the most? Let us know with the hashtag #TheParkNeedsUs, and we'll feature it on our social channels. So please, if you're interested, you can share that and stay connected with the Central Park Conservancy. And you can see us on social media and YouTube at Central Park NYC. So if you'd like to see any of the past weekly walks, you can do so on our channel there. We'll be back next week. And once again, I just want to extend my gratitude for you joining us and enjoying our programs. It was really lovely to see you all again. And until next week, I will say stay safe and be well. Thanks.